Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Hands on CISO podcast. My name is Adi, and today we'll be talking to Jimmy Liranzo, Director of IT and Information Security at VIP Community Services. Jimmy, great to have you on the podcast today. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, before we even get into what you're doing now, how did you get started in security?
That's a very interesting question because I I started just over 25 years ago actually, so I still remember this as if it was yesterday. Initially, a friend of mine sent me an email that contained a malware, and once you click on it, well, it was something non-malicious. I mean, it would just start printing random things non-stop until you shut down the computer. But that automatically piqued my interest. I mean, I automatically started going I wanted to figure out like what else can I make this do. So that led me to several online hacking forums, IRC channels. I mean, you name it. And at some point, I was already accessing systems left and right, and got to the point where I have my own botnet. I mean, all for fun, nothing nefarious, or I mean, just back in the days, it was all purely fun. But then my family immigrated to the US, and that actually took a shift because now I find myself in a new country. I don't speak the language, don't know the culture, don't have any friends, and even worse, I don't have a computer. So that was a little bit of a struggle in the beginning. Eventually, using my computer skills, I was able to get myself a computer by helping others. Pretty much the computer that people threw out, I will take those in, I will fix it and resell it. So that was kind of like one way that I started going. So I dived more into the IT, then I started doing a little bit of consulting. Then later on, after I had my associate, I went in for the New York State Psychiatry Institute. That was actually one of my greatest experience. I was there for about 11 years. And in there, I did everything from help desk to system administration to security. I mean, you name it, I did it all. And also because it was part of a research institute, it helped me to improve my vocabulary, my writing and written skills. I mean, it was a wonderful experience. Later on, I decided to go back to school, so I went in and got my master's in cybersecurity, and then became the director for IT and information security for VIP Community Services.
Oh, that's really interesting. So you had that interest when you were younger, but then you went in a different direction and sort of came back. What made you come back?
Well, I never left. So technically, I was always on the back end doing something, and even regardless of the place that I was, even at school, I was always trying to find ways around their network. What in my previous role as well, I was in charge of actually securing every system. We have several web servers and so on. So it was always my role to make sure that the systems were secure.
Got it. Interesting. And what does your day to day look like now? What do you do?
Huh. Day to day, the most static part of my day is actually the morning, actually. Most of the time, what I do is I have several dashboards that I review from configuration management to our incident report to see was there any incident recently that the team had analyzed and what was the process that it took. I also, because I oversee IT as well, so whether it's the ticketing queue or our project tracker as well. So that gives me an idea of how the data is. And I always make it an effort to make sure that I visit my team on a daily basis. So those it's like half an hour block that is always available for me. And no matter what I do, I make it an effort to be there daily. And the one-on-one interaction, I mean, it's just very helpful. I mean, for me as well, because it serves as as to me to know what's going on during the day and during the week. And for them as well, just to check on their well-being. After that, I mean, it's fairly dynamic. I mean, it could be for literally anything gets thrown at you in this field.
Interesting. So when you do both security and IT, is there how do they merge together? Because I see a lot of people do have these two roles together. I guess that's fairly common. What are
Mhm.
the things that are more IT-ish and what are the things that are more security that you do in your day?
Hmm. Well, Eddie, I'm at odds when it comes to that because if you understand what security is, I mean, it's literally securing those IT systems. So when you segregate the two, you're losing a key value in there. So to me, all my team members, whether they're in security or IT, they actually need to be part of the security discussion. They need to know at least how do I triage an incident? What is my approach to it? So I think there is more value to having them integrated than having them separate.
Interested. Interesting. How do you keep learning? Because it sounds like you've learned a lot over the years, and this is not a field where you can stop. So, like, how do you manage the time between taking care of everything that needs to be taken care of, talking to management, working with your team, and also learning about always like being on?
Yeah, I have a methodology. I mean, for on a daily basis, the one thing that I rely the most is actually threat intel. So any news to know what's going on around, especially my sector. But aside from that, I mean, I enjoy lots of podcasts. I think I'm going through almost all of yours already, but some very great lessons from there as well. But my learning is actually more targeted. I tend to, instead of consuming just random content of the internet, I tend to concentrate more on the projects that I have on the next 6 months, a year. So most of my reading is actually targeted towards that goal. And by the time that I actually do get to that project, I feel like I'm very well prepared.
Hmm, interesting. And when you look at the time you spend in building the culture, teaching the people, making sure everyone knows what is something that should be done and shouldn't be done in terms of security, like the employees of the company. How much is that a focus of yours versus the more technical side of putting controls, like making sure no mistakes can be made?
Yeah, I think that is everyone's role. The employees as well as the myself and the security team. And one thing that need to understand is that yes, you do need to educate them all. But depending on your company size, you may need to concentrate on what I call like your high risk user. And it's always, it is always a small pool. So we often talk about users as if they're like everyone is negligent. It's actually quite the opposite. Users tend to be very security focused, and they actually tend to concentrate and do their best to not make a mistake. So my approach is concentrate on that small group, whether it is through your internal phishing, recognize who's more prone to click on a link, and train them. Make it personal. Make it personal to the point that they understand that what you're trying to teach, it's not about protecting the business, but it's about protecting themselves. There's so many scams. There's so many phishing emails that go into their personal email that may lead them to compromise their bank account or crypto wallet if they're into that. So when you make it personal, it resonates on them to a level that to me it seems like it becomes unforgettable. Like they always like, and they will send you those snippets like, "Hey, look what I catch! Like this is a fishing, right?" And I'm like, "Yes, well done, great job." So we keep afloat, and I have seen actually great improvement on those that you do the one-on-one session, on those that are considered greater risk. We have seen a great improvement in that area when it comes to it. But regardless of how much training you do, you need to understand that that is not within your control, what a user is going to do or not. So, if it's not within your control, you need to make sure that you implement the proper security measures to ensure that if it happens that a user happens to click on a link, you have the proper mechanism in place to be able to detect and prevent any further threat.
Interesting. Have you ever been in a situation where you've had to like operate when things were on fire?
Yeah. Uh,
Could you share more about how that feels and what are the actions you do when that happens?
well, when things are on fire, I actually, one thing that I like to do is I like to meditate. I like to take a 5 seconds break. I'm like, just control my breathing, just let me take 5 seconds. I breathe, and then the first thing is to assess the situation. First, what is within my control? And how big is the fire? Can I put it out by myself? Do I need to seek additional counsels? Who do I need to reach out to? Sometimes, it is just outside of your control and you need to just run about. But one thing that I'm also mindful is actually it is the mental well-being of my team during an incident, because those stressful moments are precisely the time that people tend to burn. So, and you need to be mindful that no matter how crazy it is, no matter how busy it is, everyone needs to take at least a 1 minute break. So that way, instead of you putting the fire does not put you out.
Hmm, interesting. Are you ever on the other side of because it sounds like you're really the supportive figure for the people in your team and you really like make sure that they're prepared. Are you ever on the other side of being more of a bad cop, like making sure people don't do anything they shouldn't be doing? Does that happen?
Um, I like to think that, the organizations have policies and procedures that we all need to follow. And sometimes you happen to be the enforcer for those. In the case of my case, I'm in the health sector, and there are regulations and compliance that are just not optional, and it just has to be done. So, but regardless, you never want to push, you never want to force no one. You always need to find a way to strike a balance in understanding, making sure that the message does not come across as the backup. You have to do this. You have to do like no. You need to explain, and people know when they're actually being negligent. When you actually they have been getting 3, 4, 5 times, and then suddenly you came and say, "Hey, that's it. This is the last time." So they just go on and do it. I think it's a nature for us to just procrastinate across the board.
Interesting. What do you think is one of the biggest challenges in cybersecurity right now?
Ah, challenges. I I do believe one of the greatest challenges that we have is associated with data governance and data security. And the reason why I say it is because the fact that that is the number one target, the number one area that threat actors will target. Data security and governance tend to be the last leg of most cybersecurity program. And I do believe that that actually needs to start changing. We need to start concentrating on data protection more, because if that is what they're targeting, then that is what you should be protecting first, more than anything else.
It's interesting because also you say that like you're in the health tech space, which is the most, I would say that and fintech are the most protected and regulated, and I would say probably health is even more than fintech. No,
Yeah, they're right in line. So what I say, Addie, is that when people think about fintech versus health tech, to me, you're protecting data, whether it is customer data or patient data. You are protecting data, and you need to make sure that you have the proper control in place to what happens when that data goes outside of your environment.
it's really interesting. Do you think that the what's it called, like all the regulations, all the standards that you have to be beholden to, like all the minimums, let's put it that way, is that actually making companies safe? Or would you say that that's like the minimum and then what happens beyond is interesting? Like, how do you view that?
Yeah. Well, Compliant compliance does not mean security. So compliance, you barely doing the minimum as you stated, and the minimum is not gonna get you there. So, and that's what I think that many of us are actually getting it wrong. We're doing the minimum, and we are in compliance, but you're not secure. You're not doing the best that you possibly can, and there are plenty of tools available for you to make sure that you improve So the very minimum, I mean, if you just say, okay, I have my antivirus and I have multi-factor authentication on, then all right, yeah, that's it. But what happens if those two are bypassed? What then? So you need to be able to do a lot more than compliance or the minimum.
Interesting. How do you feel about AI?
That is all hype.
Okay,
Yeah.
go on.
No, I'm joking with you. Um, in reality, I mean, there are two sides, just like any coin. Um, so on the one coin, you're going to have the bad side. That is actually your deep fakes, voice and video cloning. That is actually going to be a major challenge for the several years to come. Primarily because for smaller organizations or smaller or medium-sized organizations, they're going to rely on manual controls and people to be able to um, remediate that. And on the other hand, a cost for a possible implementation or a countermeasure to that may be cost prohibitive for them as well. But on the plus side, AI with the release of ChatGPT, Gemini, or Copilot, I think that it's coming to be of a greater value to the security team than any other organization. And the reason, I mean, the any other sector, and the reason why I said that is because I do believe that AI in its current form has the ability to basically be your SOC analyst. So and if you're able to free up those smart minds instead of actually taking countless hours responding to incidents, what you're doing now is they're starting to become more proactive. Now they can become more engineers. Now they can actually expand the scope of what they can actually implement. Automation is actually going to be a key driver in the case of AI. So remember, AI has the capability to integrate with all the systems that you have and at the same time, whether something happens in the cloud, something happens in an endpoint or a mobile device, it can catch that information and automatically respond to that incident, like literally instantaneously. But there is gonna have to get used to, just like the self-driving car. I mean, even if you put it in self-driving mode, you're like, like you're hesitant. So there's gonna be an adaptation, especially when you see that it's coming too close to another car. You're like ready to press the brake. Um, but there's gonna be some adaptation that has to be made to the point where you will relate some of the controls or automated response to your AI platform rather than relying on manual processes.
Interesting. It feels like you've thought about it a lot.
Well, the thing is that AI is nothing new. AI has been in existence since the 80s, and I started using AI in about 2015. One actually of the earliest form of an AI security was the user and entity behavioral analysis. And what that approach does, it's basically a solution that with with agentless, without a specific agent, can correlate data and using machine learning, it can tell you a user is signing in outside their normal hours, any risky behaviors that a user may do, whether it's a location based or other areas. So that has been a technology that has been quite an assistant for a while. And if you're just happen to be reading about AI now, I think I gotta say it's going to be challenging for you to navigate through all the vendors because now everyone is saying they do AI. And of course, they have to say it. If they don't say it, they're not going to sell or they're going to disappear. So, but are they really using AI? So then you have to go back several years and say and ask yourself, okay, what was the solution that they have in 2020? Anything before ChatGPT release. What was the solution they have? That's actually going to be a little tricky for security teams that are just getting started on it to make a decision. So I think it's going to play a major challenge in the decision making.
Interesting. I remember when I was at InfoSec at London, there a lot of vendors are really focusing on saying that they do AI, and not even that they do AI, but they protect against AI. And it seems like they care like the vendors care about it much more than the actual CISOs are concerned about it in a way. Do you relate to that? Like, how do you see it?
Well, the greatest asset is actually is the vendor's marketing team. And
Uh-huh.
so the way that they foretell some solutions is as a magic bullet. And I think the approach should be to get a system that you can have full visibility, that you can encompass all of what your tools are, that they can all communicate to it. Because otherwise, you're going to end up with multiple AI systems, because one is going to tell you, oh, we do it all until you implement it. And then oh, but not yet for this one. Oh, no, neither that one. And I'm like, oh, okay, so now I need to find a countermeasure for this. So you get another AI system. So make sure that you don't fall into the vendor's trap. Just do your research, please.
Interesting. When you, for your company and like in your experience in general, do you think security professionals tend to prefer building things in house or whenever possible using vendors, using third parties, like minimizing the amount of things the company has to essentially worry about with inside?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because I don't think that most organizations have the resources to be able to do most of their in-house development and what that entails. So I do believe that we tend to rely more on third-party vendor or open source tools to implement any measure or improvement, unless it comes from the operational side, where you're thinking about, having some custom development that will integrate system across the board or just provide greater efficiency to the organization.
Hmm. And if I go back to the more people side of it, what do you think is something that people that are outside security don't necessarily understand about this field?
I will say that security is not about the business. Security is just as personal as it is the business. As I was discussing earlier, um, security, it's about protecting yourself. That cybersecurity awareness training that you don't want to get, that you continuously procrastinate, that is actually what is going to help. Then in reality, they're actually getting a free training to protect themselves. So if you happen to not be in security, just make sure you pay attention to that. Make sure that you know that security is just as personal as it is to the business. So, for example, with AI and the deep fakes, for example, one thing that people are using is voice cloning. Imagine someone you care about just recently calling you. You can hear the voice. They leave your voicemail with an emergency, that they have an emergency and they're asking you to send in money. So that those are just some of the nature that you need to be aware of, and regardless of where you are in the field, you need to be mindful. Security is just as personal, especially in this day and age. It's just as personal as business security.
Interesting. How do you manage being as secure as possible and yet enabling the business as much as you can and not putting too many, you know, blocks and restrictions and just like making it very hard to operate?
No, I think the first thing you need to understand is that business is what takes priority. The business is what pays for the security tool. The business is what pays for the security team. So whatever controls you're thinking of implementing, you need to think it from the perspective that you just stated. You need to be a business enabler. You need to be sure that whatever controls you're putting in place, you have the necessary stakeholder as part of the process. So in your testing phase, you need to make sure how are they going to be effective. You don't want to be the one that just come in and say, hey, this is a great solution, set up and done. And then no one can work. If no one can work, the business cannot generate revenue. If the business cannot generate revenue, then all right, bye bye. You're no longer needed.
It's a nice way to put it. Like at the end of the day, no business, no security team, no security team. Like it all just doesn't matter.
Yes, but that doesn't mean, though, that you are to be relaxed, that you're not to implement the proper security measures that are required. What it means is that you need to have an understanding of what the risk is. Let's take it in a case where someone else would like to, let's say someone in higher up in the executive team would like to make a decision that you understand is too risky. In that case, what your approach should be before you even say no, because you should not be no should not be part of your first words that you use on any approach that comes to you. To me, you actually have to understand, okay, what is the risk? Once I understand what my risk is, then I need to understand, can I find a countermeasures to try to mitigate that possible risk? And if I can find a countermeasure, how much is that going to cost me? So now you come with that decision and you bring that decision to the key decision makers and let them make an informed decision. This is the risk. I do not recommend it. So, but if you would still would like to proceed with it, this is the countermeasure. This is how much it's going to cost you. Are you willing to accept the risk that remains after we implement the countermeasure? So you let them make the decision, but let them make an informed decision. Don't just go in there and say, no, this is too risky. You can't do this. I mean, it's not reasonable. That's not what we're there for.
Interesting. That makes me think of, okay, let's say you've said this is very risky. If we do that, we will need to take these other actions also, or we will be opening ourselves to some new kind of possible issue, and I don't recommend we do this. And then they make the decision to do it. Do you sleep that night? Like how is it?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yes, because that it has to be you have to have it as part of your risk register where the person agrees, I am accepting the risk. It's no longer your risk. I mean, you still have to deal with it, but if the risk was to materialize, that okay, it's fine. That is a risk that let's say your CEO accepted. Then yes, then it is the CEO responsibility now. Okay, well, technically my responsibility, but it was the CEO who accepted this risk. So you transfer the risk from the security team to the executive team. If they're willing to take it, then that's what you're there for. You take the risk and you move on.
Interesting. Have you seen any like changes in the way security is viewed in from the business side in the last few years or last
So,
many years?
hmm, yes, I do believe there has been a shift. I mean, if you go back pre ChatGPT release that started the AI wave, the previous 10 years before that, there was actually a shift that captivated the mind for the executive and the board team in terms of ransomware attacks that was happening across the board. So when you make it there, that is when innovation starts happening because now they're opening their bank account and saying, hey, we need to invest in security. We need to do this. Are we protected from ransomware? I think, I mean, very few organizations have not have a conversation about ransomware pre chat GPT. I do believe that that was actually a major shift in the field. Overall, aside from that, I think the only technology-wise, maybe endpoint detection and response was the only technology that actually advanced. Aside from that, I think that we remain fairly the same. But after ChatGPT, I mean, now the concentration completely shift into innovation, automation, and just basically triaging incident across the board. Do I have visibility or not? So it makes it a lot more interesting now.
Interesting. And do you think how do you see it continuing? Like what's going to happen in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? It's going to be different.
Huh. What's going to be different? Well, definitely there are several questions that are unanswered. I do see that Unfortunately, but yes, AI is still going to play a major role into the future. That's going to become the next social media. So everyone is going to want to have one that can do something else. So, but in the industry itself, I'm seeing several technologies, for example, such as integrating Gen AI into firewall, which is actually the edge device for all organizations, have literally not changed like in the past 30 years. Like there has literally not been any fundamental change in how those devices are actually how they operate. So with the integration of Gen AI into the firewall world, what that does, or not just firewall, but firewall configuration management and all around the clock, what that does is it gives you the opportunity to keep track of any configuration changes to continuously audit your environment. And that could potentially eliminate the risk for misconfiguration, which is actually one of the trend for some of the breaches a misconfigured device or web portal that happen to be open and someone take advantage of that. So you have the opportunity to continuously monitor your environment, to continuously be thinking on how can I implement, or not how can I implement, but how can I innovate in an area that just let me know what's going on around the clock. And let's make it change. Did Addy change something on my 200 locations that I don't know about? All right, let me see what was the change that Addy made. Can I revert that change and so on? And also, it's going to be more flexible. I do believe that when you can actually just type what your idea is and you turn that into security, that means that the queries I can now ask them the question that I want, but without necessarily knowing what the commands behind it are going to be. So I think it's going to be an interesting approach down the line.
Interesting. How would you say, um, where on the scale from completely technical to completely human, soft skills, non technical, where's the CISA role?
Well, um, the CISO should definitely have some technical background. But I do believe that the CISO needs to be part on the more on the non-technical side, on the operational side, on the business side, because it needs to have the mindset to protect the environment, to innovate the environment, to be proactive about it. So the more you concentrate on the business, the more you concentrate on what brings the revenue for the business, I do believe that they actually have to be farther away from the technical side. That's why you have a team. That's why you have the support for them to do the technical work while you concentrate on the hired executive work.
Do you think it's about your seniority in the field? Like you start as more technical and then you get less technical, or is it like different routes people take?
Well, so there are different routes. So actually, for a CISO, I've seen CISO that don't necessarily come from a technical background, and there are great CISO that have come out of legal and HR departments. So sometimes, I mean, I don't think that is a straight path, I mean, especially security. I mean, once you get a good understanding of the field, I in how to manage and balance people across the board. I don't think that the technical skills um, are as needed, but they should be required. They should, even if that is not your background, you should definitely get yourself up to date so you understand the underlying structure of how security play a role from the technical level. But definitely, say so. You should be more concentrated on, on your soft skills.
Interesting. Is there anything you think that CISOs tend to overlook?
The CISO thing, one thing I'll say is I do believe that we keep saying that there is a shortage of cybersecurity talent, but put in a help I mean put in a cyber analyst position, and you see how you're going to get hundreds and hundreds of responses. But most of the candidates do not meet the requirements. So what that tells me is that instead of saying that there is a shortage of talent in the industry, To me, there's a shortage of mentors. There's a shortage of leaders who are willing to train the next evolution of the cybersecurity leaders. So if one thing that I will say that they can concentrate is, if you want to fill those roles, tap into the IT department. They are already well technical, whether it's software development, help desk, system administration, network. I mean, they already have a mindset. They already understand the technology. You just need to translate and given the inputs of security, especially the best area of knowledge that you need to have to be in security. I think that if you tap into the IT roles, which are more straightforward to fill as well, so I think there's a greater opportunity to fill the gap in between the shortage of cybersecurity talent across the board.
Interesting. So you're saying that for people who are hiring within cybersecurity, a good place to look is IT departments because it's people who are potentially interesting. Do
Hey,
you
yes.
what
Oh,
do you think there's like special qualities, or like how do you know if someone is going to be interested in security? Because I would assume it's not necessarily like security is a lot of paperwork. Also, I would say IT is sometimes more hands-on fixing
mhm.
stuff. Like, how do you see it?
Motivation. You
Hmm.
can see when someone is motivated, even in the interview process. So, tell me, what have you done? So, basically, on those that are highly motivated, there is a one trend that I have identified. Almost the vast majority of them have a lab in their environment, and they've been testing everything that you're actually talking about. Oh yes, I have this on my lab. Oh yes. Oh my. Oh, I'm gonna. Oh, as soon as I get home, I'm gonna do this. So once you see that level of motivation, that tells you it is a person that loves this. And no matter what you throw at them, you're not throwing them work. You're throwing them pretty much just fun stuff. That's literally the way they see it.
Okay, so another question I have is what are some of the more frustrating things in cybersecurity?
Ah, oh, I have a couple, but one of the most frustrating thing in my case is something that I've been hearing over and over again, where it states that humans are the weakest link in cybersecurity. And whenever I hear that, like it gets me boiling. I'm like, seriously, this is the best we can do? I mean, who is in charge of implementing the security measures to protect those humans? So is it them that are actually at fault, or is it the fault of us, the cybersecurity professionals, that are not doing our job correctly? And don't get me wrong, there are many great leaders in this industry that are doing a phenomenal job across the board. But there is also a group that they're just not keeping up today. They're just not keeping up to the standards. If you tell me, for example, okay, someone were to send you an email, and that email happened to contain a phishing link. What happened to your security? What happened to your phishing security measure? So, all right, if I passed it, all right, it was an advance. But it gets to the endpoint. The endpoint gets compromised. What is your EDR solution? If let's say that it shuts down your EDR, then what happens? What is your visibility? What is your layer security approach? I do believe that we need to get more into the mindset of providing security solutions that are layered into the point that we account for human errors. That is something that it just have to be part of the nature. We cannot be thinking or lying to ourselves by saying that humans just want to make mistakes. No, on the contrary, for the most part, they want to be secure. They want to be protective. So, and eventually, yes, it may happen, but at the end of the day, it is the role of the security professionals to provide security measures that account for those errors as they come along.
Interesting. That's a very like taking ownership and responsibility approach to it.
As we show. So it shouldn't be the other way around. The users, I mean, you're telling a user to act as a security professional. That's it's unthinkable. I mean, you're dealing with threat actors, and you're expecting the end users to be at the level of the threat actor.
Interesting. Another question I wanted to ask is when so you have a few years in the field already. Is there anything, any mistake you remember you made along the way, or a decision you made that ended up affecting the company in the wrong way, and then how did you deal with it, if so?
Yeah, well, Eddie, I think if when you're in this field long enough, I think you have to be very lucky to never make a mistake. But as a friend of mine always tell me of how lucky are those that are prepared. So I have made several mistakes throughout my professional career, but I always like to think that mistakes is not what defines me. So, but on the contrary, that is what helps me excel. That is what helps me improve. That is what helps me prepare for the future. So I make sure that I do not make the same mistakes. Some of the most valuable lessons that I learned from the mistakes I made throughout my career, it's first is actually to never second guess yourself. After you make a mistake, it's easy to say, "Oh, I should have done this, I should have done that." But no, now that you have more information, you know that perhaps you should have done something different. But in reality, it's quite the opposite. You should have still done the same because now you know. Now that gets you prepared for the future. Another lesson is actually to make sure that anything that you're going to put your name on, anything that you have to write your or digitally sign your name on, make sure that you thoroughly read anything from the biggest to the smallest letter. And if you have legal counsel, rely on legal counsel or someone else to also provide a review for anything that you're going to sign, because the consequence are going to be there, and you're going to pay the price if you neglect to do that. And last but not least, it's to make as many mistakes as you possibly can early in your career. So, because what is a mistake if not a decision going wrong? And you need to be making decisions as you grow. Now, that doesn't mean to be negligent. What it means is to make decisions and be able to live with the outcome and be able to improve based on those decisions that you make. Learn from the good ones just as bad as the bad ones, and enjoy the journey, enjoy the road, because it is great, but as you grow, you need to make sure that you are more mindful of not making those mistakes, because the higher you go, the greater the consequences for those can be.
Amen.
So,
Very interesting. Sounds like you've learned a lot from the field. Like it's these aren't textbook answers.
absolutely not. It wouldn't be. I like to. there's a- I enjoyed self-development and to help my team grow just as much as I love the field of security as well.
Interesting. That's that's good. Okay, so we're coming close to the end of the interview. I'll ask you two final questions, a bit of two sides of the coin. One, what is the thing or things that keep you up at night within cybersecurity? Like, what are the things that are on your mind?
That keeps me up at night. I mean, say definitely a breach happening while you're sleeping. Um, so even though I mean, do have protection, we do have countermeasures for if that were to happen, and into the what we do. So we do have a provider that will help, but it is a challenge, and it can happen anytime. So you need to be very mindful of that. But I'm more excited, to be honest, on the trend of technology, the way that is going, the way that it's improving. I think we're starting a new wave where the possibilities are endless as of now.
Interesting. So you're tapping into my second question, which is what is your favorite part about security? Like what makes you get up and do this again and again every day? Because like I mean, there are easier things to do. Like this is definitely a high stress, high responsibility field. Like what do you love about it?
Dynamic. How dynamic this field is. No single date is like the other. You're always going to be dealing with something different. There's always new themes coming along. The different perspective of how different leaders actually, which you have some experience and you see how different leaders as they come on, they have different perspective, and we are all technically securing the same thing. So to me, it is fascinating. And I mean, this is something that I enjoy more than work itself. I think that, it's just joyful, to be part of it.
Amazing. Wow. This has been super interesting, and I love the energy that you bring to it. So thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.